If you are outraged by what Israeli soldiers and settlers continue to do to Palestinian people, please say together, we refuse! We refuse! If you are outraged by the horrific violence that Israeli settlers and soldiers are continuing to do to Palestinian people, please say, we refuse! We refuse! If you are outraged that our government is funding and giving moral cover and political cover to this violence at to the tune of $3.8 billion every year, please say, we refuse! We refuse! If you are outraged at the silence and complicity and complacency of so many of our Jewish communal institutions in the face of this violence which is being done in our name as Jews, please say, we refuse! We refuse! If you are outraged by the racist and Islamophobic and cynical attempts to smear our Palestinian and Arab and Muslim friends and comrades as anti-Semitic for speaking about their lives and their histories and their right to return home and their right to resist, please say, we refuse! We refuse! Welcome to every single person here. We are so glad you are here. We need to channel our it is our responsibility to channel our collective outrage, our collective refusal, our collective grief and anger to demand that our government that our government end all military funding to Israel. We are so glad you're here, and I want to first invite you, if you hear words tonight, if you hear words here that make you uncomfortable or not the words that you've said in your own mouth, please, we beg of you to remember that the urgency of Palestinian lives is more important than any discomfort you may be feeling today. We have watched in horror and outrage as hundreds of Israeli settlers invaded the town of Huwara in the West Bank of Palestine and committed a pogrom. We have watched in horror as settlers burned homes and burned ambulances and burned vehicles, injuring so many Palestinian people. We have watched how that pogrom was done with the full support of the Israeli state and the Israeli military. We have watched in horror as the Israeli military invaded the old city of Nablus in the West Bank, killing 11 Palestinian people and injuring 100. We have watched in horror as this violence has been done, funded and supported by the United States. We have watched in horror as Israel has elected its most right-wing, fascist government in its history. And do not be seduced or lulled into thinking this is an anomaly. Do not gaslight Palestinians who have been saying since the beginning of Zionism, this is Zionism. This is not an anomaly, this is not an exception. This is Zionism doing what it does, terrorizing Palestinians, making their lives impossible, and trying to displace them from their land. We want to be very clear, the mask is off of Zionism if it was ever on for you. The mask is off if it was ever on. And we refuse to gaslight Palestinians any longer. This is genocide. This is genocide, this is genocide, this is genocide. And we have a responsibility to channel our collective outrage to stop funding this genocide. Welcome, everybody.
And meanwhile, the day after the massacre in Nablus, what did we see from our elected official, our senator from New York, the Democratic majority leader, Chuck fucking Schumer, flew to Israel and met with Netanyahu, hugged that motherfucker, and told him he had the U.S.'s support. Shame! After people were massacred. And this is where our tax money is going. $3.8 billion every year in military funding. Funding war, funding genocide. And last year in 2022 was the deadliest year in the West Bank for Palestinians since 2005. And this year, in the first 2 months of this year, it is already twice as deadly as last year. This is what Zionism is. This is what it does. This is what our tax money is funding. Every day in the West Bank, people are being murdered, and most of them are teenagers. I'm an educator here in New York City, and to think that my children, my students, would be just murdered every day because a government across the sea fucking hates their lives, doesn't want to see them live, I can't bear it. And I know that that's why we're here today, because none of us can bear this. And we are here to say that this is not an aberration. This is what Zionism does, and this is what it's been doing since 1947, when the Nakba began, when over 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out of their homes. This is the continuation of that. This is what we're seeing, and this is what is happening today. And we are here to say enough. Enough! 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 Thank you for being with us.
As Jews who support freedom and dignity, as Jews whose families have known the impact of fascism, of pogroms, of ethnic cleansing, of white supremacy, we will not stand by in horror and watch as Palestinians are being ethnically cleansed from their lands. We will not stand by in horror and pretend we are powerless. We are not powerless. Are we powerless? No! Are we powerless here and just going to stand by and watch this? No! The power is in our hands to stop this $3.8 billion of annual military funding every single year that is funding this nightmare. We are at a historic crossroads, and it is important for each of us to make a decision today whether or not we are with Palestinians in their struggle for freedom, or we are directly in opposition to their struggle for freedom. There is no middle path. There is no it's complicated. There is no both sides. There is, do we support colonialism or no? Do we support colonialism? No! Do we support colonialism? No! Do we stand with Palestinians in their struggle for freedom? Yes! Do we stand with Palestinians in their struggle for freedom? Yes!
And we are your MCs for today. Yes! Yes! My name is Una, and this is Morgan, and we are so honored to be here with you all. We are so grateful that you came out today, that you didn't let despair keep you home, you didn't let apathy tell you it doesn't matter. You knew that it was important to be here today, and we are so grateful for that. We are part of Jewish Voice for Peace, New York City. Yes, it's a national organization of Jews and friends who are working for collective liberation from New York to Palestine. And if you're here at this action and it is your first time, welcome. We are so glad you're here. And we'd love for you to join us. You can connect with Sarah, Eliza, Sandra. They're waving their hands. They are our welcome committee. There's a Sarah over there, and there's an Eliza somewhere, and there's a Sandra, and there's Eliza here. They'd love to welcome you in and talk to you, so please come find them. We have organized this event to speak to other Jews. And we are so glad that everyone is here, and we are so glad for everyone who is here, not just Jews. And we are particularly want to share our love and appreciation for our Palestinian friends who are here today. We are so grateful that you're here, and we are so grateful to stand with and by you.
We are situated on the ancestral and contemporary homelands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie peoples. We offer our gratitude to the land and those who have cared for it for millennia. And we acknowledge that land acknowledgements are empty if they are not coupled with action. Our rage at Israel's ongoing violent displacement of Palestinians also motivates us to examine settler colonialism that has occurred and is ongoing here, on this land, right here. Today we recommit to organizing in ever more strategic ways to uproot white supremacy and colonial violence and fight for land back. Land back! Land back! Land back! Land back! In solidarity with indigenous sovereignty movements from New York to the Atlanta forests to Palestine.
Feels like we want to do a cheer also, so our chant. Can we do this? Our collective movement say. Our collective movement say.
The 3.8 billion ends today.
Our collective movement say.
Our collective movement say the 3.8 billion ends today. Our collective movement say. The 3.8 billion ends today.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, we're going to bring up our first speaker. We are really honored to have everyone joining us today, and also all of these amazing speakers. First up, we are so honored to welcome one of our brave rabbis in our community who stands up and says that Zionism is not Judaism. That Zionism does not get to speak for Judaism, and that we will create a Judaism beyond Zionism. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Miriam Grossman from Congregation Cholot Hayenu.
I want to thank every person who's here for being here. I want to start by again thanking the Palestinian folks who are here today. And I want to say, as a rabbi, or rather maybe just as a person of faith, may God bless you and keep you, and may God keep your families safe. Our promise, by being in this space, our promise here to all the Palestinian folks here and beyond, is to keep showing up, is to never let the rhetoric of so-called two sides distract or detract from the reality that one side has enacted a brutal military occupation, ongoing colonization, and decades of apartheid and disregard for Palestinian life, all of that with the backing of global superpowers and American tax dollars. Right. We will not be distracted from that fact. As was also said, I know that for some Jewish folks here today, this may be your first time coming to an action like this. It may be your first time in a space that calls on Jewish people to speak out against the violence and displacement enacted in our name. And I want to say that if you have fears about what it means for you to be here today, if you're afraid of what you might lose in your family, or for some in your work or community, I just want you to know you're not alone, and that fear doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong, and it doesn't mean you're not strong enough. It just means it's something to move through, and I have moved through it, and many folks here have moved through it, and I just want to surround you with love and tell you to keep moving through it and keep acting. Keep acting. That is the only way to move through it, and to say you're not alone. Even if you're afraid, you're not alone. And even if you are afraid and it takes some level of bravery to tap into, I want to acknowledge that there is no bravery or risk here that any Jewish folks are taking or could take that could ever equal the bravery and stamina that Palestinians and Palestinian Americans show every day in affirming their humanity and in fighting for their own survival. As a rabbi, seeing the numbers of Palestinians and Israelis killed in the past few weeks alone, I grieve all of these losses, and I know I'm not alone in that. And I know that Palestinians of all ages face disproportionate violence, of course, duly at the hands of settlers and the state itself. We can hold multiple truths at once. We can grieve all of these deaths, and we can hold and name and share out loud rage. Rage at the system of racial supremacy that places Jews like me, Jews racialized as white above all other Jewish people. And rage at a system of Jewish supremacy that places Palestinians at the bottom, at the very bottom. We can hold our grief and we can hold our rage, and there is no shame in naming these things aloud. Last week we watched as Israeli settlers burned down the Palestinian town of Huwara, while the military stood by and watched and were utterly complicit. Shame. Shame. And then, as was said, Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich directly called for Huwara to be erased, which is a direct call for ethnic cleansing. And we heard recordings of settlers reciting the Jewish evening prayers, davening Mariv, and then continuing to terrorize families. And while this horrifying rampage and footage of those songs, those sacred songs being sung as homes burn, has shocked many American Jews, we must also say that this event is simply an extension and not an exception of endless military occupation and Jewish supremacy that is enshrined in law. And most mainstream Jewish establishments and communities refuse to meaningfully challenge that. That's right. And I just want to say to my colleagues, perhaps, who are not here, that I love you and we will find a way. I want you out here with me. And I do love you. I couldn't listen to all of the recording. I watched, but I couldn't listen to it all, actually, hearing those prayers. But what I know, by knowing those prayers, they're set the same ones every night. What I know is that eventually they would have come to Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim, lifros aleinu sukat shlomecha, would have been sung. Which means, help us, O God, to lie down in peace. Help us, O God, to lie down in peace. Help us to rise up to life. Spread over us a shelter of peace. I cannot fathom what it means to sing, help us to lie down in peace, as you set homes on fire. Jews around the world, whenever night comes, many will sing these words again tonight. And I know that when I recite these words tonight, I know that I'm praying for peace in a way that so many of us are praying for it, which is not simply the absence of rampages like this. Peace does not mean a return to the situation as it has been at any point in the last 75 years, which is one of ethnic cleansing, Palestinian dispossession, and apartheid. Peace, real peace, the peace that I pray is spread over us, the peace that I pray we rain down and enact and create as a canopy together is a just peace. A just peace with full human rights for all Palestinians. It means a world where we are all free because we know that our freedom and our liberation and our survival is all bound up together. God, spread over us that peace. Spread over us that peace. May we spread over ourselves gathered here today and far beyond that shelter of justice and peace. May we be relentless and may we be unwavering. Amen.